Today is Tuesday, the 9th of June, and we are reading from day 160 of the Book of Mysteries by Jonathan Cahn. Day 160, the Cohanim Confession. I was wondering, I said, when the priests performed the semicar, placing the sins of the people onto the sacrifice, they had to lay their hands on the sacrifice, but they also had to confess their sins over it. They had to do both. Otherwise, the sacrifice couldn't die for those sins. But when Messiah was taken by the priest the night before his death, the priest laid hands on him, but there was no confession of sin. Come, said the teacher. Let's see what we find. He led me into the chamber of scrolls where he retrieved from a high shelf a scroll of medium size, laid it on the wooden table, and rode it to the place he was looking for and began translating out loud. At that, Caiaphas tore his clothes and said, "He has spoken blasphemy," to which those in the council agreed that he was guilty and deserving of death. They condemned him to death on false charges. In the semicar, the priest confessed the sins upon the sacrifice. Was the sacrifice guilty of those sins? No. The sacrifice could only die for those sins if it wasn't guilty of them. Correct. Therefore, for the semicar to be performed on the sacrifice on Messiah, the high priest had to speak over him sins he was not guilty of. So, what sin was it that they spoke upon him? The sin of blasphemy. But the sin that's spoken upon the sacrifice is not the sin of the sacrifice, but the sin of those who speak it. So, the blasphemy was not the sin of Messiah, it was the sin of the high priest and of the priesthood. They judged God of blasphemy against God. To judge God of blasphemy is itself a blasphemy. The priests were confessing their own sin, but it wasn't their sin alone. The priests represented Israel, and Israel represented the world. So the priests were confessing the sin of man, the sin of the world, in the semicar of the sacrifice for man. The first sin and the beginning of all sins, you shall be as God. Blasphemy. Oh, so the sin was confessed over the sacrifice by the high priest, and the priest touched his head with his hands. So the semicar for the sins of man was performed. And by God, said the teacher. He confessed your sins upon him. As it is written, he made him who knew no sin to become sin for us, that you might become the righteousness of God. The mission. He became sin, your sin, that you would become righteousness, his righteousness. Live today as the righteousness of God. And we are reading from Genesis 3 verse 5, Leviticus 16 verse 21, the Gospel of Mark 14 verses 63 and 64, and 2 Corinthians 5 verse 21. May the grace and peace of God be with you.